Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're talking about Shadows of the Galaxy spoilers part 11. As usual, those are my first impression. I haven't played with any of those brand new cards, and this is obviously an analysis in the context of Premier constructed in at a competitive level. Obviously, I also try to take into account how playable the card is in draft, but it's mostly for Premier that I'm kind of judging those cards. Anyway, without further ado, let's go into our first card. It is going to be Head Hunting. So with this one, I haven't been a big fan of this card. Basically, in order to get the full potential of it, you need to have up to 3 units. You cannot attack base, which is, in my opinion, a deal breaker for the card. And a +2 attack bonus is nice, but since you can only attack unit with it, you're most likely going to lose your unit as a result of attacking. So it's you need bounty hunters into play. You need the +2 attack to be relevant. The fact that you can attack with multiple units is going to be overkill most of the time. So yeah, I think the card is pretty situational, and so I don't think it's a very good card at all. I think there's just far better things to play in a deck. So I give this a 2 out of 10. Moving on, we got General Recon. This card reminds me a lot of Gladiator Star Destroyers, which is a very mid card to say the least. Like, it does see a little bit of competitive play, but really in purely green-black deck, and I think that after the expansion, this card is not going to see any play at all. If you compare this card to Gladiator, the advantage is that it can, if the unit has already Sentinel, it can give it an experience token. The ability triggers every time when it plays, but also when it attacks. And the unit is a 5/7 instead of a 5/6. So there's a few, and it has an official title, but it is also a ground unit, which is significantly worse than being space unit in my opinion most of the time in terms of like costing. So yeah, it is slightly better than Gladiator, but I'm still not super impressed by the card. I think that for 6 cost, there are just far better things to play in those colors. So personally, I'm not a big fan. It might feel very specific need, like if you're in need of a Sentinel unit in that cost or whatever, this could be a good card. So it's only Sentinel for a turn. Um, it has Sentinel for a turn. You can Sentinel to something else. Like it's like it's very similar to a Star Destroyer, Gladiator, a Gladiator. So it's okay. It's an okay card. I give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's playable, but it's going to be pretty niche in my opinion. Next, we got collections, Starhopper. The stats are pretty terrible, and the smuggle cost is discounted, which is nice. But overall, I don't think this is a constructed card. I gave it a 3 out of 10. Okay, next we got a Ray. So Ray is very interesting. So first of all, she has quite a good stats for our cost. So 4/7 for 5 is pretty good. Without being groundbreaking. First thing to note is that she's a 5-drop that has no immediate impact on the game. That means for her to be playable at a competitive level, she really needs to be very strong to make up for that 3 big weakness. And if she's really good enough to make up for that, well, she has a couple of things going for her. She has good stats. She has the force trait, which is nice. And then she has the ability to heal a non-heroic unit, to heal unit when she attacks. Very situational with all this with the surgical droid that being able to heal other units is a fairly situational thing to do. And if they are non-heroic, they also give a shield. The problem is like in a constructed deck, the vast majority of your heroic deck is going to be made out of the vast majority of your constructed deck is going to be made of heroic units because heroic units are usually more powerful than the neutral ones. So either you have to make huge deck building constraints and you have to really force yourself to play a lot of non-heroic cards in your deck in order to make your ability worth it, or you have to sorry, or you have to play a non-heroic deck and just accept the fact that she's very rarely going to give a shield to anything. Either way, it's not really amazing. Unless you can play her in a villainy deck, which you can if you happen to be playing Kylo Ren as a leader. So you can also, it works if you have Kylo Ren in play as a unit, but that would be extremely unreliable. Obviously, you want to play you would want to have Kylo Ren as a leader if you want to consistently play her in a villainy deck. And if that's the case, then she can give a shield every time she attacks, and she becomes kind of a Luke Skywalker on a unit, which is kind of cool. With that being said, Kylo Ren as a leader is not really the kind of leader that would want a card like this. It's as far as I've seen, Kylo Ren as a leader is extremely aggro, and is most likely going to try to focus on very aggro card, while Rey is really a typical mid-range card. So personally, I don't think this card's seeing play in a Kylo Ren deck, in my opinion. So overall, I think the card could see play maybe in some Force deck just because she has the Force trait, and some pretty good stats. And sometimes she can give out a shield, she can heal. I think that's okay. So I think she's playable, but I don't think she's particularly exciting. I give her a 5 out of 10. Okay, so now let's go into the villainy counterpart, of course, Kylo. Once again, very good stats, 6-7 for 6 with the Force trait, and an ability that works on attack. So once again, the card does not have an immediate impact on the game, and is even more expensive, which would make Kylo Ren theoretically even worth. But Kylo Ren has something pretty good. I think the what saves the card is the fact that the card is very strong with Energy Conversion Lab. So if you basically play Energy Conversion Lab and you use Kylo Ren, basically Kylo Ren can use the ability on himself for an 8 attack swing. Um, he won't get an experience, but he will get it's going to be an 8 attack swing, and an 8 attack swing can one shot about anything, which is very strong. So he's a very good target for ECL. And I think that's the main way people are going to be using that card if they ever use that card. So it's basically a good target for ECL that also gives you an additional Force unit. So if you're playing a Force-oriented deck that plays ECL, Kylo Ren could be a good option for you because once again the guy can one-shot about anything, which is kind of cool. So once again, the same problematic that we can have with the whether you want to play this in an heroism deck using Rey as a leader. A problem once again, Rey as leader, of course, hasn't been particularly impressive, and not only that, Kylo Ren does not have any specific synergies with Rey as a leader, which makes it a relatively awkward card to play in that deck, even though giving experience on attack can be quite good, especially when you have those stats. So overall, I give this card a 6 out of 10. I think it's slightly going to be. I think it's going to be better than the Rey counterpart. I still think it's not going to be a super highly played card, and I still think it's going to be relatively situational. Moving on, we got the Chaos of War. So one of the main thing with Sabine Red, right, is that Sabine Red it had to really make a big choice. Is either want to play a lot of double red cards, which some of them are very powerful, like for example, well, of course you would play aggression, but you also think about whether you want to play with Sol Guerrera, and which is kind of a very good double red card. And it was very a dilemma for double red Sabine because they would either have to choose between, and also they were of course more restricted in terms of card pool because you have to play only with red cards, which really made playing 4 cards I believe in a lot more difficult in this deck, even though 4 cards I believe it is an essential part of what constitutes an aggro deck in Spark of Rebellion. So it really had this dilemma of having to either uh, deny itself some really good opportunities in order to play Spark of Rebellion, not play no I'm sorry for a cause I believe in, and then play for a cause I believe in, but then make the 4 cause being very weak. Now, basically, I would say that the deck is going to be free of that constraint because of the Chaos of War. The Chaos of War is essentially serve the same role as for a cause I believe in as a finisher, and the ability to deal damage out of hand, and potentially a lot of damage as well, which I think is incredible. So obviously the card is a finisher, so playing out of aspect is also a possibility. I can also imagine this card being played in deck that already plays for a cause I believe in as an additional, even though those 2 cards don't combine very well because this card is not heroism. But it could be kind of additional copies of for a cause I believe in to make the late game burn even more oppressive. With that being said, I think the card is significantly worse at 5 than it is at 3, and the reason for it is because as the game progresses and as the opponent is going to have less and less card in hand. So basically, this card is, even though you want to play it not relatively late, you still want to play it in a moment where your opponent has a lot of cards in hand. It also is symmetrical, deal damage to you as well. So I believe that overall the card should be worse than Four Cards I Believe In, but Four Cards I Believe In being one of the best aggro card in the game, this card is still very good, and this is going to allow a double red deck to basically play without Four Cards I Believe In potentially, or it's going to give additional options for late game burns to aggro decks. So it's good to see aggro getting additional tools, even though those kind of cards are not my favorite. At least this one can be interacted with a little bit. It's not, if you empty your hand, you can kind of like limit the potential of this card. So I'm not as negative on this card as I was on Four Cards I Believe In when it got spoiled. It's a very strong card. I give it an 8 out of 10. It's a very good card. Moving on, we got Han Solo. So the interesting things about leaders in this expansion is that either leaders have been fairly weak or they've been very specialized. So meaning that they are good, but in very much you have to build heavily around them. And I have to say that Han Solo is the first leader that we've seen, and potentially the last because there's only one leader after him, that is generally good. Is a leader that doesn't require very specific build around to be usable. I think that you can run Han Solo in a wide variety of decks. It doesn't need to be played in one specific build to be good, and that is refreshing to see that, to be honest, because so far all the leaders we've seen are either super bad or super specialized. So this is good to see. So the ability, of course, his leader ability is very strong. Basically, every time you're playing a trading card game that is similar to Magic, and you have a card that does cost reductions on your cards or allows you to gain extra resources, every time this happens, you have to really pay attention because that is something you have to really keep in mind. And Han Solo has this basically for free. You can reduce the cost of your unit. Yes, you have to deal 2 damage to them, but this can turn into an upside in a lot of cases. For example, if you play a unit with grit, then suddenly the damage you deal to your units is also an attack bonus. So, and obviously once again everything becomes cheaper. There's a lot of units where if you have a unit that is all about its stats, then obviously dealing 2 damage to it is a big deal, but some of the units it's not really about the stats, it's about their abilities. And then being able to get access to the abilities earlier in the game, even if it means on a weaker body, is very worth it. So I can see a wide variety of decks. I can see Han Solo being played in some sort of a Wookiee deck, like we've seen all those Wookiees with grit. So Han Solo would be obviously the leader of choice for a Wookiee deck, as far as we know. Even though we're still missing like a critical mass of Wookiee to make this deck work. But if as more Wookiee get shown, I think there's a potential for Han to be something. I can see this card on this ability being useful in an aggro deck to be able to get consistently. You can basically play 3-drop just as if there were 2-drops, and then you can even play like a 2-drop, and then you can play a 1-drop for free. Like you can play multiple units at once and overwhelm your opponent. This deck would be very fragile to card like Bombing Run or Overwhelming Barrage, but I still think it could be a very powerful archetypes potentially. And we can also this being in mid-range deck as the ability to drop like bigger cards for cheaper. So there's like a lot of different options that needs to be explored. Without being said, there's a couple of things that are going wrong with this card, and so it's not the perfect card. It goes into play relatively early on, but the stats of the leaders are relatively weak. 3, 6 for 5 is not really a super impressive stat line, to say the least. Basically, we need to be 4, 6 for 5 to be kind of on the curve with the other 5-cost leaders that see competitive play. So yeah, the stats are still relatively weak, as it's been the theme of this expansion. Is like leaders have powerful leaders ability but weak stats. It's kind of been the theme of this expansion. The ability also becomes better as any numbers of units can be played from your hand and will basically cost 1 less. So you get, instead of being limited to only 1 unit per turn, to get that bonus, and multiple units can be played that way. So I've tried to build a little bit around Han Solo, and I so far I found the leaders to be good, but it's not broken as many people say. I don't think it's broken. The fact dealing 2 damage to your own unit is a significant cost, so you really need to kind of like build around the leader. It is, as I said, it's not a leader that you need that only works for one specific deck. It's a leader that can work for multiple decks, but you still need to build around him for him to get the potential. So I'm gonna give this leader a 7 out of 10. Some people might say it's a little bit a rough rating. Maybe it deserves an 8 out of 10, but so far I've tried to build with the leader and I haven't found anything to be particularly super impressive. So it's a generally very useful leader, and it is in my opinion the best leaders we've seen so far, or at least it's the leader that is going to be able to be played in a. There's going to be a wider amount of different decks you can build with this deck compared to the other leaders, which are very locked behind one specific archetype. But like I've tried to build around him, and I'm still not super 100% convinced that he's gonna be like the bomb that some people have said he will be. But we'll see how it goes. 7 out of 10 might be a little bit of a rough rating, but this is kind of my rating of the leader for now. Moving on, we got Tobias Becket, a very solid 4-drop for yellow. So before the expansion came out, one of the big weaknesses of yellow is like it didn't have many good 4-drops, and this is now problem solved with, of course, the 4/4. It's 4LOM. So the 4-drop 4/4 ambush that we saw earlier. Um, but now yellows have another option here, which is Beckett's a 4/5 for 4 is a very decent stat line. We see this on Kane and Jarrus, and an ability that can be pretty useful. You play an event, you exhaust a card. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. It's not like amazing or anything, but it's a pretty good ability. It's a pretty good ability, and the smuggle is kind of cheap as well. Only 1 extra over the cost of the card, but you need to be able to play blue-yellow to be able to make that work. So overall, I think it's a very decent card, and it's going to see a decent amount of play. I give it a 7 out of 10. I don't think it's gonna. I think 4. I still rate it lower than 4 LOM. I think 4 LOM is gonna be more powerful in a villainy, specifically in villainy yellow as a 4-drop. But in any other cases, I think Tobias is gonna be a good way to go. Or maybe they're gonna be played alongside each other. Next, we got Toro Khan. So this is the card that every person in the world who doesn't own 3 copies of Boba Fett Disintegrator got super happy to see that card, because this card is very close in power level to a Boba Disintegrator, and in some decks I think it's going to be better than it, and it is an uncommon, so it's going to be super cheap. Basically every super expensive legendaries from Spark of Rebellion has a very viable budget alternative, and Toro Khan is one of them. So obviously a 3/5 stat line for 3 is simply just by itself amazing. Also the fact that it's only a villainy aspect requirements mean that you can play this card in any villainy deck. I think it's safe to say that this is the strongest mono villainy card that we've seen in the entire game. Just a very solid card. The Bounty Hunter title is also a very good trait. And whenever you play another Bounty Hunter, you may deal 1 damage to that Bounty Hunter in order to ready this unit. So a pretty powerful ability in an aggro deck. So, of course, elephant in the room, let's talk about it. Is this card better than Boba Disintegrator? And in my opinion, in some deck it will be. If you're playing an aggro deck, I think Toro Khan has potential to be better than Boba Fett Disintegrator. Especially if you play a substantial amount of bounty hunters. So it is, in my opinion, more specialized than Boba Fett Disintegrator, because obviously you need to be playing bounty hunters. But I think in those cases it might be better. Obviously, the fact that it's mono villainy means that it can also be played in a wider amount of decks than the Disintegrator. I think so. In Boba Green, I'm pretty sure Boba Disintegrator is going to remain the preferred option just because of its interaction with Energy Conversion Lamp, ECL. Boba Disintegrator still remains a very powerful combo that I think you cannot really do with Toro. However, in Boba Yellow, there is debate because the Boba Yellow is a little bit more aggressive. If you're playing Boba Armor, you might prefer to play Boba Disintegrator because you can go Boba Armor on Boba Disintegrator, which is quite useful. And I don't know if you're playing, but you're playing a substantial amount of Bounty Hunter, so it's going to be interesting to see which one ends up making the cut. But regardless of whether Boba Disintegrator remains the go-to options for Boba Yellow, Toro was still going to have plenty of other opportunities to see play. There's been so many strong 3-drops in this set, and this one is no exception. I'll rate it a 9 out of 10. And the only reason why I'm not rating this a 10 out of 10 is because it's competing with many other 3-drops. So it's not gonna see play everywhere because there's just so much competition for 3-drops in this set, in villainy specifically. Talking about other powerful 3-drops, we got Hunter, the Action Brood, and this card is very interesting. So this is basically we used to be playing Soup Racer in Boba Yellow as a new option for 3-drops. This card is basically it's strictly better than Soup Racer in the context of a mono yellow deck. He has 2 very relevant trades, Underworld and Bounty Hunter. And if your opponent has a bounty, it gets a shield. So basically, how good is this card? So basically, I think that, as I said, this card would see, if it was put in Spark of Rebellion, it would see a lot of play, regardless of whether there's bounty or not, because it would see a lot of play. Just because there would be naturally people playing bounty cards, and you would just get a 4/3 for shielded every once in a while. And the fact that its villainy can be picked up by Vader, for example, stuff like that. But anyway, I think that in the context of the fact that we have so many other options here for 3-drops in this expansion, this is where the competition gets a little bit rougher for Hunter. For a 3/5, for example, is better than a 4/3 most of the time. And here the ability is only really good if you are playing in a bounty deck. So my opinion is I think this card is going to see a lot of play in a bounty dedicated deck, or if the meta sees loads of cards with bounties being played all over the place, which I think is unlikely. There's a few good competitive bounty cards, but I don't think it's going to cover the entire meta, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I give it a 7 out of 10. This is a good card, but obviously I would rate this card higher if it was not for the fact that there's just so much competition for 3-drops, and I think this card is going to be mostly played in bounty dedicated deck. Next we got F1 Mon. Kind of a big letdown here. 4/6 for 5 is okay stat line. Is a good stat line, I guess, but not particularly like super impressive either. No immediate impact on the game, and the on-attack ability is quite situational. The enemy unit needs to be a non-leader. It needs to have attacked your base, and then you need to attack with that dude, and then you need to have a friendly unit that is on the same arena. That is just a lot of things to ask for, and it's on an on-attack ability, which means that you need to survive and be able to attack to actually trigger the ability. So basically extremely situational and not that powerful ability. Stat lines is okay. There's just far better things to do for 5 resources in this game. I rate this card 2 out of 10. I think in a vacuum the card is not terrible, but there's just so many better things to do for 5 resources, especially in villainy, in command villainy. There's just so far better things to do. Next we got the Death Mark. So Death Mark is interesting. I think the card is a little bit overcosted. To the 2 resource bounty, I think really need to be very powerful to be playable. And this one is okay. So drawing 2 cards is kind of nice. The bounty decks have a tendency to empty their hand very quickly because there's a lot of 0 cost, 1 cost card that you're playing in a bounty deck. So those decks have a tendency to empty their hand very quick. So having the options to draw a card can be very nice. And at least this is a card that is a bounty and draws you a card, which is nice. So I would see this card maybe in a Bosk deck as a way to get additional kind of like card draw. But that card I think is a bit overcosted. I think as a 1 resources card I would have loved it. At 2 I'm a bit more skeptical. But this might be a card that bounty decks needs. So it might not be the card you want, but it might be the card you need, like a way to kind of replenish your hands. And of course double trigger with boss means you get to draw 4 cards, which is kind of neat. So I don't know if this is going to see play, but I think it has potential to see play. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. This might even see play in a sideboard, for example, if you're playing in kind of a more grindy matchups and you want a bit more value. This also could see play, but the two resources cost is really what makes me a little bit on the fence on this card. Next we got the Lurking TIE Phantom, a card that is fairly similar to 7th Speed Defender, which is one of the best cards in the game and one of the best 3-drop in the game. So how does it compare to a 7th Speed Defender? So it has more attack, but only when it's attacking. And the ability, in my opinion, is worse than a shield because okay, it cannot be captured, cannot be damaged or defeated by enemy card abilities, but it still dies to minus ability. So everything that kills the 7th Speed Defender in one shot with make an opening, take down, all those cards basically still kill the Lurking TIE Phantoms. So so instead of protection, so basically Lurking TIE Phantom has the advantage of always being protected from this ability, while the 7th Speed Defender you need to basically shot it once and shot it twice to kill, so it only protects you once. But TIE Phantom has many other qualities. The fact that obviously that protection works against enemy attacks, which is not the case for Lurking TIE Phantom. Lurking TIE Phantom is ridiculously easy to deal with if you happen to have a space unit in a space arena. And once again, okay, you get a 4 attack, but only when you're attacking. So I can see a world where Lurking TIE Phantoms would see play over a 7th Speed Defender, but I think this is not the world we live in right now, and I think at the moment 7th Speed Defender is going to be an overall better card. Once again, I can imagine a specific meta where I could see the Lurking TIE Phantom be the preferred options, but for now I think 7th Speed Defender is a better card. I'll give this card a 5 out of 10. And I don't think you really can play both, because it's like, that would be a lot of 3-drop in space. Maybe you do play both. I mean, maybe. Okay, next we got Evacuate. So Evacuate is a card that is very reminiscent to a card I love in Magic called Upheaval. Basically returns all the cards equivalent in opponent's hand. So it's kind of what we call a Wrath effect. So it's kind of a board wipe, but it's a board wipe that doesn't deal with unit permanently. So it does not deal with leaders, which can be an upside or a downside. I think it's most likely going to be an upside, because then you can kind of afford to deploy your leader earlier in the game and still be able to play Evacuate. So I don't know if it's going to be more with an upside or a downside, but this can be both an upside and a downside. And returning cards in opponent's hand is incredibly powerful in Star Wars Unlimited, because obviously you do draw 2 cards per turn, meaning that you are less likely to run out of gas than in a game like Magic the Gathering. Therefore, there's not really that big of a difference between returning a card into your hand and actually killing this unit outright. I mean, obviously it is different and it is definitely worse, but I think that overall the card is very, very strong, and this card is gonna put yellow control on the map by itself. So this is the card that Thrawn decks have been waiting for, like basically control or even like yellow Iden has been waiting for as well. So this kind of like super controlling yellow decks I think are gonna be put on the map thanks to that card. I can also, this card is in play in Palpatine yellow, so it's an incredibly powerful card, and very impactful, that allows you to deal with everything on the board, and for a very cheap cost compared to Super Laser Blast. So I think this card is on the same power level as Super Laser Blast in my opinion. It is obviously slightly different. Super Laser Blast deal for stuff forever. This would be more of you need to have some sort of ways to win the game faster whenever you're using that card, most likely, because otherwise the opponent is not going to run out of gas ever, because you are doing card advantage when you're playing a card like this, so it's mostly like a tempo cards, but the tempo gain is just absolutely absurd. So I think this card is very strong, and it's going to put like yellow control decks on the map. I give this card a 9 out of 10. It's a very, very good card. Moving on, we got Second Chance, which is a very unique card that allows you to play this on the card. When a unit dies, you basically bring it back to play for free. It's very interesting. So a couple of things to note about this is that if you play this on a card and then you defeat the card, but the opponent has already taken initiative, then you don't get to use the ability, because if you basically when you taken the initiative, then you can't really play the card for free. So there's a workaround around this. It's also fairly expensive, comes with at 4 resources and cost double blue. So for this card to be worth it, you need to play it on something that costs more than 4. So it is fairly situational. Um, it is fairly expensive. It's more for a double blue deck, but in the right situation, it can be incredibly powerful. So I give this card a 6 out of 10. I think it is fairly situational, but in right situation, it can be quite good. I can see this in a double blue mid-range deck. I'm not sure if such a deck will exist in Shadow of the Galaxy, but if it does, then this card could be potentially. I think with the aspect penalty, the card becomes significantly worse, because suddenly you have to play this on something that costs more than 6 for this to be worth it, and even if it does, then yeah. So I think it's a fair situational. 6 out of 10 might be a little bit generous for this card, to be honest. But I'm not super convinced this is going to be. It's going to be very niche, to say the least. Next, we got Enterprising Lackeys. Finally, a decent double green card. Double green cards have been absolutely terrible since we got Command, which obviously very strong. But then after that, all the double green cards have been absurdly situational, or simply just outright bad. And this card is pretty good. 5/5 for 4 is a very good stat line. And then you can replay the card for a small gold cost later on in the game. And when you defeat it, it goes back as your resource, so you're guaranteed to be able to play it for a small gold cost later on. It's a decent mid-range card. It's not nothing mind-blowing, and of course the fact that it's double green is a big constraint, because double green has been kind of bad for now. But the card by itself is pretty decent, so 6 out of 10. 5/5 for 4 stat line is just very solid. Next we got the Architan Assault Cruiser, and this card is a bit awkward. It's awkward for 2 reasons. The first reason is, first of all, Space Unit and Ambush is not a super strong synergy, because there's going to be a lot of situations where there's simply no Space Unit. Space Units are just much rarer than ground units, generally speaking, in the game. Therefore, anything that is Space and Ambush is going to be a little bit more situational. And not only that, this card is fairly expensive, comes at 8 resources and a 7/8, so the odds that you have something really big to kill with the Architans as it comes out into play is fairly unlikely. So obviously there's going to be a situation where you can snap a home run with this and you're like, this card is the best card in the world, but it's going to be fairly situational. So that's the first awkwardness about this card. 7/8 stat line is okay, but for 8 drop it's to be expected, I would say. And then the second part of the ability is also very awkward, because it basically allows you to ramp whenever you manage to kill a unit with that unit, when you defeat a non-leader unit with that unit, but only whenever you are attacking. And the problem with this is that once you have 8 resources, you don't really need to ramp anymore. Like, the ramping does not become something you want to do anymore. So yeah, that's basically 2 very awkward things about this card, which makes me a bit skeptical of whether it's going to see competitive play. Maybe if you're playing a deck that wants to ramp beyond the 8 and really want to ramp for insanely big stuff like the Legion. But then even in that case, you still need to have something good to ambush, so it's going to be a bit difficult. So it is a single green, which is going to help it in terms of the amount of deck in which this card can see play. But 4, I'm not super convinced. I think 3 out of 10 is a bit rough, though. This should probably a 4 out of 10. I think 3 out of 10 is kind of a rough rating. I would probably rate this card a 4 out of 10. Just so you know. Next, we got the Wild Rancor, and the Wild Rancor is once again, just like the 5/5 for 4 earlier, it's a very solid mid-range card. It's a 6/8 for 6 is a very good stat line, especially with Overwhelm. So it's basically ATST but with +1 health. And then the when played ability gives an immediate impact on the game, deal 2 damage to each other ground units. That can be quite strong, and even if you don't kill anything with it, just making Unique weaker and easier to kill also is good combo with Rancor's Overwhelm, because then you can attack those damaged units and deal more damage to the base. Obviously, you also have to damage your own unit whenever you do that, and obviously the double red aspect requirement is going to be a problem. Also, double red, it feels like it's been a very aggro color so far, and this is very much kind of a mid-range, so it's kind of like not completely in sync with what double red wants to do. So that's kind of the weakness of the card. I give it a 6 out of 10. I think it's a solid card, but I don't think it's going to see a lot of play because double green's aspect recommend. It kind of feels like a little bit like, even so Guerrera has at least a bit more aggro potential. Wide Rancor, it does really feel like a very mid-rangey card, which is not something that double red has been kind of known for so far. Next, we got the Daring Raid, which is what we called in a trading card game a shock effect, which is just 2 damage to a unit or a base for 1 resources. And this card is amazing. This is an amazing card. Why is it an amazing card? First of all, there's a lot of units in this game that have, especially after the expansion, has going to have 2 health. Being able to finish off a unit, kill a unit for only 1 resources is going to be amazing, and the flexibility to deal damage directly to the opponent base is going to be great as well. I'm not entirely sure that's going to be the case, but this might be an auto-include in every red decks. And I know this is kind of a hot take, but it's possibly going to be. This card is really, really good. Once again, I haven't played with the card. Obviously, 2 damage doesn't kill most units in the game, but the ability to deal damage to base is just incredible. So I give this a 9 out of 10. This might be a 10 out of 10. This might be a 10 out of 10 card. Maybe I was a little bit too conservative with my rating with a 9 out of 10. But yeah, I think it's an incredible card, and it's going to see play in most red decks, if not all red decks. This is going to be a staple for sure. And this might change the meta in a way that basically, because this card exists, 2 health units are going to become unplayable because of that. This could be the case. Like this might be a card that has that much impact on the game. Moving on, we got Altering the Deal. We went from a very, very generally powerful card to a very, very situational card. And once again, I haven't been impressed by capturing as a mechanic in this game. I feel like there's a couple of very good capturing cards, but they are very far between. And in order to make a card like this work in your deck, you really need to be playing a substantial amount of capturing effect, because otherwise this card is just going to be too situational. But I think if you are playing a capturing deck, this card should be part of your deck, because being able to make a capturing effect basically become permanent is quite powerful. But once again, you need to be applying a substantial amount of capturing effect in order to play this. And once again, if you're going to be playing this, and the problem is like most of the capturing effect in this set are just not that good. I think the best one is going to be Relentless Pursuit, and I think that outside of this, not many really strong capturing effect whatsoever. There might be more coming to us, but for now, not really that great. So it's a decent card in a deck that does not exist, or in a deck that's currently not good enough. So I give this a 4 out of 10. And that's it for this overview of the Shadow of the Galaxy Part 11. So looking forward to see more cards being spoiled. I think that they're going to reveal pretty much all the cards on Friday, if I've understood correctly. So that's going to be a lot of cards to review together, and potentially more powerful cards. I think most of the legendaries have been spoiled, and I think it confirms the fact that this set is going to be very budget friendly. We've been the legendary cards are not like there's a couple of very strong ones, but most of them are not going to be like 3 ofs auto include in every deck, like in most decks, like we could see sometimes with Boba Fett Disintegrator being like a 3 of in all yellow black deck, and Vader being an auto include in all the green black decks, and Han being an and Luke being an auto include in any blue white deck, and then Falcon being an auto include in all yellow white decks. So that kind of card do not seem to exist in Shadow of the Galaxy, and this is going to make the set as a whole a lot more budget friendly. And not only that, they also provided us with many powerful alternatives to those very powerful cards, which therefore is going to further reduce the price of those cards. So I think, of course, it's a set that is going to be relatively budget friendly, in my opinion. From that point of view, most of the strong cards in the set are either uncommon or rare, so it's going to be relatively easy to put your hands on them, even if we have limited supply from Fantasy Flight game as we had in Spark of Rebellion. So that's a good news, I guess. Once again, thank you for following that video. And if you want to have some coaching with me, I will post, as usual, my schedule on the comments below. And thank you so much. And if you like that kind of video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.